There's something that's been happening quietly across this country that almost nobody is talking about. And if you own physical gold or silver right now, you need to hear this before you say another word about it to anyone. I'm not trying to scare you, but the information I'm about to walk you through has serious implications for your personal safety, your financial privacy, and frankly, the security of the wealth you've worked your entire life to protect. Because here's what most people who own precious metals don't understand. The moment you start talking about it, you've already made a critical mistake. And in today's environment, that mistake can cost you everything. Let me explain exactly what I mean. Right now, we're living through one of the most extraordinary wealth transfers in modern history. Gold has gone on an absolutely historic run. Silver has followed. And millions of Americans, particularly those in or near retirement, have made the smart decision to move a portion of their savings into physical precious metals. They bought gold coins, silver bars, stored them at home, or put them in a local safe deposit box. And they told people about it. Family members, friends, maybe even mentioned it casually in a Facebook group or a neighborhood forum. What those people don't realize is that they may have just painted a target on their backs. Let me tell you a story that most people in this space don't like to tell publicly because it makes everyone uncomfortable. A retired school teacher in the Midwest, let's call her Margaret, had been quietly accumulating gold and silver for years. She wasn't wealthy by most people's standards, but she'd done the research. She understood what was happening to the dollar, and she'd been disciplined about converting a portion of her retirement savings into physical metals. She kept them in a small safe in her closet. She was proud of it, and occasionally, when the topic of inflation came up, she'd mention to people that she had her bases covered. Nothing specific, just a hint. She thought it was harmless. One morning, she woke up to find her back door pried open and her safe gone. The police came. They filed a report, and the detective said something to her that she never forgot. He said, "Ma'am, in 9 out of 10 precious metals thefts we investigate, someone in the victim's circle already knew they had it." Think about that. 9 out of 10. Not strangers, not random opportunists, someone who had heard or been told or figured it out through casual conversation. That is the world we are living in right now. And as gold and silver prices have climbed to levels that would have seemed almost fantastical just a few years ago, the stakes have gotten dramatically higher. We're not talking about a few $100s in coin collections. We're talking about life-changing sums of money sitting inside people's homes, in their safes, in their closets, in their basements. And the simple act of talking about it, even in passing, has become genuinely dangerous. Now, before I get deeper into the security side of this, if you're watching this and you have over $100,000 sitting in a retirement account, I want you to check the description below. I put together a free guide that shows exactly how thousands of American retirees are protecting their hard-earned wealth using some strategies that most financial advisors have never even mentioned to them. It's completely free, no strings attached. Just check the description. Now, let's talk about where this danger actually comes from, because it's not just the obvious threat of physical theft, as serious as that is. There is a much larger story unfolding, and it has everything to do with the environment we're now living in. An environment of financial instability, government surveillance, digital data exposure, and a history that very few people bother to learn until it's too late. Let's go back to April of 1933. The Great Depression was in full swing. Banks were failing, people had lost faith in the financial system, and a significant portion of the American population had done the exact same thing that smart savers are doing today. They had moved their savings into gold. Real, physical, tangible gold. They thought it was safe. They thought it was theirs. Then President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 61102. With a stroke of the pen, the United States government made it illegal to privately own gold coins, gold bullion, or gold certificates. Every American was ordered to surrender their gold holdings to the Federal Reserve Banks by May 1st of that year, in exchange for a government-set price. Not the market price, not what gold was actually worth, the government's price. And then, once the confiscation was complete and the gold was sitting in government vaults, they raised the official price of gold dramatically. The people who handed over their gold received a fraction of what it was actually worth, while the government pocketed the difference. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not here to predict that's going to happen again in exactly the same way. Modern legal frameworks are different. The political landscape is different. But here's what I want you to really internalize. It already happened once, in America, in living memory. And the people who lost the most were the ones who were the most visible about their gold ownership, the ones who had receipts, records, purchase histories, and whose neighbors knew they had it. Privacy wasn't just a preference in 1933. It was the difference between keeping your wealth and losing it. And here's why this matters so much more today than it did back then. In 1933, if you wanted to know whether your neighbor had gold, you had to physically see it or hear it from someone who knew them personally. Today, the digital footprint you create when you buy precious metals, when you discuss them online, when you post about your stack on social media, when you let your location be known through delivery tracking, credit card records, or community forums, all of that creates a permanent, searchable record of who you are, what you own, and where you live. This is not hypothetical. There are people right now actively mining social media platforms, forums, community groups, and even church directories, looking for signals about who might have physical wealth stored at home. They're looking for the retiree who mentions their gold portfolio in a comment thread. They're looking for the person who posts a picture of their new safe, or who mentions in a neighborhood app that they just received a delivery from a well-known precious metals dealer. The sophistication of these operations has increased dramatically as the value of the metals themselves has risen. And then there's the other layer, the institutional and governmental one, the one that operates completely in the shadows. Here's something most precious metals owners have never been told. When you purchase physical gold or silver in certain amounts, there are reporting requirements built into the system. Dealers are required to file specific forms when transactions hit certain thresholds. And while the rules around this are complex and have changed over time, the fundamental principle is this: your transactions may not be as private as you think. Every time you buy or sell, there is a record. And in an era when government agencies have more data collection tools than at any point in human history, the paper trail you leave behind is longer and more detailed than most people realize. Now, compound that with the fact that central banks around the world, the very institutions that print the money you're trying to protect yourself from, have been buying gold at a pace not seen in decades. Central banks globally have been accumulating physical gold at record levels year after year. Poland, China, India, Turkey, these central banks aren't buying gold because they think it's a quaint old relic. They're buying it because they understand something that the mainstream financial media doesn't like to talk about. Gold is the ultimate reserve asset when you don't trust the counterparty. When a central bank buys gold, it's making a statement. That statement is, we no longer fully trust the currency, the bonds, or the financial instruments of other nations. And when you have dozens of central banks around the world making that statement simultaneously, you have to ask yourself, what do they know that the average American retirement account holder doesn't? Let me tell you what they know. They know that the global financial architecture, built after World War II, the one with the US dollar sitting at the center of it, is under enormous, unprecedented stress. The BRICS nations have been working for years now to establish alternative payment systems, alternative reserve currencies, alternative trade arrangements that don't require the dollar. We've seen countries settle oil trades in currencies other than the dollar. We've seen bilateral agreements that specifically exclude dollar-based settlement. And at the foundation of every single one of those alternative arrangements is gold. Russia, when it was cut off from the SWIFT system and had hundreds of billions in dollar reserves frozen, discovered the hard way what happens when your wealth is stored in a system that your adversaries control. China watched that happen and quietly accelerated its gold accumulation. So did India. So did dozens of other nations. The lesson was not subtle. The only money that no government can freeze, confiscate, or devalue with a keystroke is physical precious metals held in your own possession. And this is exactly why the privacy question has become so urgent. Because as gold and silver become increasingly recognized as the ultimate form of financial sovereignty, not just by individual investors, but by nation states themselves, the political dynamics around precious metals ownership become more charged, not less. The value is rising, the recognition is spreading, and historically, when those two things happen, powerful interests pay closer attention. Let me give you another historical parallel that I think about a lot. In 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. He ended the ability of foreign governments to redeem their US dollars for gold at the fixed rate. It happened on a Sunday evening in August with almost no advance warning. People woke up Monday morning to a fundamentally different monetary system. The dollar was no longer backed by anything except the full faith and credit of the US government. And the people who had positioned themselves wisely, who had physical gold outside the banking system, who hadn't advertised their holdings, who had been quietly and privately building their reserves, those people experienced a massive transfer of wealth in their direction over the following decade as gold prices exploded. The people who were caught flat-footed were the ones who had trusted the system completely, who had their savings in dollars, in bank accounts, in government bonds. The purchasing power of those savings eroded dramatically over the 1970s. The people who had physical gold held privately, out of public view, secure in their own custody, watched their relative wealth climb. Now we're in a period that rhymes with those earlier moments in very unsettling ways. Inflation has been running hot. Government debt is at levels that would have been considered completely inconceivable not that long ago. Interest payments on the national debt are now consuming an enormous portion of the federal budget, money that crowds out spending on everything else and creates enormous political pressure to find solutions that historically haven't been kind to savers. The dollar is under geopolitical pressure from multiple directions simultaneously, and the Federal Reserve finds itself in a nearly impossible position, trying to balance inflation control against a debt burden that becomes catastrophic if interest rates climb too high. And here's what that environment historically produces: volatility, instability, and desperate policy measures from governments that are running out of options. Now, let me be honest with you about something important. Most of the risk to your precious metals isn't coming from some dramatic government seizure scenario. The more immediate, more practical, more statistically real risk is the one I opened with: the risk that the wrong person finds out what you have and where you live. Here's the reality of precious metals theft: it's overwhelmingly targeted. Random burglars looking for televisions and laptops don't typically go out of their way to find safes. The people who target precious metals are specifically looking for them. They've done research, they've identified likely targets, and that research starts with publicly available information: social media, community forums, online groups, word of mouth. The security protocols you build around your physical metals are only as strong as the information discipline you exercise around who knows you have them. This means being ruthless about what you share and with whom. It means not discussing your holdings in any digital forum. It means being careful about delivery schedules, about the packaging that shows up at your door, about what your mail carrier, your neighbors, or your household staff might observe. It means having a different answer prepared for casual questions about your financial situation than the honest one. And it means never, ever posting about your metals online. Not pictures of your stack, not discussions of your favorite dealers, not proud announcements about your latest purchase. Some of you are thinking right now, isn't this all a bit paranoid? And to that, I'd say, look at where gold and silver are trading right now. The value of precious metals in the hands of individual investors has increased dramatically. What was once a modest insurance policy has become, for many retirement-age Americans, the most valuable single asset they own. The value of protecting that asset with appropriate privacy has grown in direct proportion to its price. This is also the moment where I want to talk to you about something important if you're in or approaching retirement. Because if you're carrying significant wealth in precious metals, particularly if that wealth is concentrated in physical metals stored at home or in a safe deposit box, there are serious questions you need to be thinking about beyond just the day-to-day security concerns. What happens to that wealth in a true financial crisis? What are the tax implications when you eventually sell? How does it interact with your estate plan? Are you exposed to legal or regulatory risks that you haven't fully thought through? And frankly, is home storage really the most secure, most private, most legally protected way to hold your precious metals? Because for many retirement savers, the answer is actually no. And the alternative that's been quietly gaining enormous traction among American retirees, the one that addresses almost every single vulnerability I've just described, is a properly structured gold IRA. Here's why this matters so much right now. A gold IRA allows you to hold physical gold and silver inside your retirement account. Your metals are held in an IRS-approved, fully insured, institutional-grade vault. They're not at your house. There are no delivery records connecting your home address to precious metals purchases. There's no conversation to have with curious relatives, because your retirement account is your business and nobody else's. And critically, if the regulatory environment around precious metals ownership were to become more complex, if reporting requirements were to change, if political winds were to shift in ways that made private precious metals ownership more complicated, Assets held inside a retirement account structure have a fundamentally different legal posture than metals stored in your closet. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, 401k, IRA, TSP, pension, this is genuinely worth understanding. Not because you have to do anything right now, but because the decisions you make about where and how your wealth is structured in the next few years could matter enormously. If you want to understand exactly how gold IRAs work, the tax mechanics, the custody arrangements, the rules around qualified precious metals, I put together a detailed breakdown in the description below. Take a look. It's there whenever you're ready. Let me bring this back to where we started, because I want to make sure this message lands properly. The title of this video is about keeping your location quiet, and that's not just about home security in the literal sense. It's about understanding that precious metals ownership is something that operates best in silence. The people who have done the best historically with physical gold and silver are not the loudest voices in the room. They're not the ones posting on forums. They're not the ones casually mentioning their holdings to acquaintances. They're the people who quietly accumulated, quietly held, and quietly watched the value of their prudence compound over years and decades. Think about what's happening right now across the global economy. The geopolitical instability is not receding. Trade tensions are reshaping supply chains. Currency volatility is becoming more frequent, not less. Central banks are buying gold faster than they have in generations because they're managing against a risk that they don't fully discuss publicly. The risk of a dollar system that can no longer be fully trusted to serve as the neutral arbiter of global commerce. And against that backdrop, physical precious metals held privately and thoughtfully are not a fringe investment. They are the most historically proven form of wealth preservation that exists, but only if you protect them properly. And protection starts with the discipline to keep your mouth shut. Don't let your stack become a target. Don't let your pride in your own foresight compromise your security. Don't post about it. Don't brag about it. Don't answer curious questions about it at family gatherings. The people who lose their precious metals to thieves, to unexpected legal complications, to estate disasters, almost universally have one thing in common. They were too visible. They let the wrong people know too much. Build your position quietly. Hold it thoughtfully. Review your storage structure and make sure it actually makes sense for your age, your circumstances, and the legal environment we're operating in. And if you're in retirement or close to it, take seriously the question of whether a properly structured gold IRA might give you better protection, better privacy, and better legal footing than home storage ever could. For those of you who have been watching all the way to the end, I respect that, and I want to give you something valuable. If you check the description right now, there's a free guide I've put together on the saving strategies that thousands of American retirees are quietly using to shield their wealth from what's coming. And for those of you with $100,000 or more in any retirement account, if you mention this video when you reach out, I've arranged access to a complimentary one-on-one educational web conference. No obligation, no pressure, just real information about how to think through your options. That's exclusively available to American retirees with at least $100,000 in a qualifying retirement account who mention this video. The window for smart positioning is always narrower than it appears. The people who act before everyone else catches on are the ones who look back years later and realize they did exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. You're already ahead of most people just by watching this video. Now protect what you're building. Keep your location quiet and stay sharp.